If you've positioned yourself as a technician, I think you absolutely have reasonable worry. If you can position yourself as a visionary and say, I know what's good and I know what's going to work for your business because I've done this many times. And yes, I might use this tool to help me execute it. I think that's where the secret sauce is. But that comes about from strengthening that muscle of curating what you see and what you find value in and where
Yeah.
you see value. And that comes about from the collective of your lived experience. Greetings and welcome back to the Kiss My Aesthetic podcast. I'm so excited to have Anniedi on the podcast. Welcome, Anniedi.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm so excited to be here.
We are new friends, as you'll learn in this podcast episode. But I knew right away from landing on your website, your social media, that we were going to have plenty to talk about because I think you and I are very aligned on a lot of different things regarding business and marketing, entrepreneurship, all of that good stuff that people tune into the podcast for. But for anyone who doesn't know you yet, can you tell us who you are, what you do, and who you help?
Yes, my name is Anniedi. I am the Chief Swagger Officer at Idem Spark, and I support independent consultants in advising them on how to secure the corporate bag. And I sometimes chuckle, right, at the calling of myself a Chief Swagger Officer, right? I remember when I gave myself that title, I wasn't feeling so swaggerific. I had just been laid off from a dream job. I had experienced tremendous career success on paper, but also massive burnout. I remember just kind of looking, at my reflection in the mirror one day and realizing that I had lost my sparkle. And so it was kind of that invitation to reimagine what the road ahead could look like that gave me my swagger. I reclaimed my sparkle and I was like, I want more of this. So I love advising folks who are just really making bold moves on winning at work, wealth, and well-being. So I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
Oh, so much good stuff to cover. But I have to know, growing up, did you ever think you were going to be a chief swagger officer? What was that dream job? What did you think that you were going to be when you grew up? And how did you land to here?
Yes, I thought I was going to be a singer. Okay, I grew up
Okay.
thinking I want to be on that big stage. And so I feel like I get to have elements of that and like, public speaking and things of that nature. You kind of get to recreate that magic, if you will. But yeah, I had no idea. I just knew. I remember taking a quiz in, the Office of Career Services during undergrad, and it was like monotony will be the end of you, right? So consulting was path for me because I loved solving kind of big, bold problems. And so, yeah, I called myself a chief swagger officer after getting laid off and being obsessed with titles and saying, you know what? I'm going to pick a title that means I can do and be anything I dream.
Ooh, a chameleon, those big, bold
Yeah.
ideas, right? Talk to me about, because I already, like I said, did a deep dive on your site and I found this beautiful video where you're talking to people that you help. What's one of the things that they come to you and they're like, I know I need what you've got? Where are they at? What are they feeling? And what's that transformation that's occurring once they work with you kind of on that consulting basis?
Yeah. So, Michelle, I think we're all kind of facing this transition point, meaning that, the old ways of working are no longer serving us. And I would argue that, right, in the next 12 months, 18 months, 24 months from now, the working world is going to look completely different. Many folks are projecting that over 50% of the US labor force is going to be freelance, right? Self-employed here 2030 and beyond. And so there's this interesting tug of war that's going on of how do I define my success and how do I kind of be the master of my own destiny in a way, right? And I think a lot of us, right, sometimes that requires the shedding of old ways of thinking, of believing what we're even capable of. And oftentimes, right, we're all sort of natural born salespeople, right? How many of us were used to kind of sending in a resume, going and sitting at that interview and really talking about how we're the best fit for the job, right? We know how to sell ourselves when it comes to being an employee, but when it comes to selling our brand and, monetizing our skills at the highest level, all of a sudden we clam up, we play small, we are afraid of our own shadows, right? What does it look like to now start to own your expertise in the boardroom and beyond and take your skills, the same skills that you would have used to apply for a job, and now translate that into corporate contracts. And so that's really the point where I get folks where they've gotten a few of these gigs under their belt, maybe freelance opportunities, maybe word of mouth referrals, an opportunity fell into your lap and you're like, "Ooh, I like the taste of that and I want more." But you've never had to develop that skill set, right? Things came to you. You were great at the marketing and just developing the authority, but when it comes to actually turning that around and going out and finding new business, well, that's a whole different skill set. So we want really kind of create what does that repeatable pitch process even look like? And I use the word pitch process intentionally because it does encompass both marketing and sales. So that's why I was thrilled when you reached out. I said, we have to have this conversation.
Absolutely.
The intersection of where the opportunities lie.
An important distinction here is really the difference between marketing and sales. Very often the two get conflated. In your words, how do you describe the difference between those two things?
Yeah. So I talk a lot about kind of the intersection between lead generation and demand generation, right? And I think that marketing does a wonderful job of demand generation, right? In terms of really building a door that opportunity can knock. And so when I was transitioning out of, being a corporate executive and climbing up the ladder and now starting my own brand, it was uncomfortable for me to think about, right? What do I want to offer? What services will I have? What do the packages look like? And I think so many entrepreneurs and freelancers and consultants, they get so fixated on the services, right? The packages. But I think the broader opportunity is what is the story we're telling? And that's where Mark really shine, right? With that storytelling, the brand storytelling that makes us feel something, right? That makes us feel connected to something bigger than ourselves. And I think once you've built that door, then we got to get savvy about lead generation, right? Like, how are we going to create a system where people can move from not knowing us at all? I call that prospecting possibilities, right? To now coming into our world, right? Learning about us, and converting into ultimately paying clients. And that is where I think there's an intersection between marketing efforts, right? That stimulate that demand, but then the lead generation activities that translate that client from being cold to sold in a signed contract.
And maybe that's the valley that people fall into, right? Is they spend all this money on marketing, they spend all this effort on this external persona. They're hiring a team like ours to help them, with all of their collateral and their visuals and their brand, which are important. But then I notice at least there is that valley sometimes between marketing and sales because they don't know again what problem they're solving, what story they're telling, or they end up kind of going for all the little fish in the
Yeah.
the very shallow pond and not
Yeah.
always going for like where's that big fish in that very 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 deep well. You know what I mean? So it's that balance too, and I've seen that with my business running it for the last 11 years. Is like where you put your effort as a business owner is so 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 indicative of the kind of opportunities that come your way.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Does that sound familiar to you?
You're speaking my language, Michelle. You're speaking my language. And I think, I love that analysis of, fishing in bigger ponds, right? Because sometimes I kind of think about this. If you've ever had a sweet tooth, right, we all kind of know like when you have a craving for something, right? And you know exactly what that craving is and you know where to get it. But sometimes I would, describe this as kind of like the difference between swinging at a pinata, right? Like you're blindfolded and you spin around and around and you're just swinging and hoping you make contact so that the thing opens up and your sweets fall out. Versus when I was a kid, right, going trick or treating for Halloween, I knew exactly the house that had the big Snickers, okay? Not the one with the little Tootsie Rolls, the one that had the big Snickers every year. And I would laser focus and go straight to that house. I think we have this opportunity to say, how do we handpick our own clients? How do we create a wait list of people who are excited to work with us? What does it look like not to just wait for whatever falls into our lap, but also to go out there and proactively outreach to those who are most positioned to benefit the most from our services. So that's where I think there's a big opportunity, right, in terms of fishing in
Yeah.
bigger.
Could you give us an example of a client that you've helped where you kind of gave them this analogy and gave them, it sounds a lot of times like the confidence and the gusto and maybe the kick in the pants to be like, yeah, go ask. Like, go. Like, you know who you want to work with, go ask. Like, is there someone that comes to mind that kind of represents that story for you?
Yeah. I have a client who came to join us. She was primarily like a PR and branding consultant, right? So she was used to helping people tell their stories and get on all the big stages, right? And when it came to her own negotiation, right, she was in that what I call short order chef living, right? Where you're just taking whatever requests come through the door and you're serving up whatever the client needs. And I think working together was an opportunity for her to kind of take that step back and say, how do I want to make an impact in the world? what should my packages look like, in terms of really structuring it in a way? And then how do I negotiate from a position of power versus one of fear? Oftentimes, I think we often go into these negotiations thinking, I just want to get them to yes, right? I just want to get to yes. But what does it look like to actually think about the types of work that light you up the most, the ways in which you want to, engage with that client, and coming in from day one, positioning yourself in that seat as a strategic partner versus a vendor. And I think that moving from kind of that service provider mindset into the consultative selling role and positioning yourself as a strategic partner can be so powerful because it means that your revenue potential becomes limitless. You're no more just trading time for dollars and articulating your value and the concept of time spent. And now you're starting to think about the impact and the benefit and the value to that client. And so working with this PR and branding consultant, she was able to like 5x her typical speaking engagement fee because she took that step back and really thought intentionally about how her expertise is valued in the corporate arena. And so it's examples like that where it's like, you can come in, even if you have a blank canvas and you've just been doing projects, saying yes to everything, you have an opportunity to get more strategic with that, get more intentional with that, start thinking about yourself in a much bigger playing field. And so that's really exciting work for me to do with clients who are kind of thinking about, a little bit of that imposter syndrome, right? Why would
Oh,
they,
completely.
kinda, yeah, exactly.
Imposter syndrome is such a common theme that ends up on almost every single episode because no matter where you get to, and I think this is something that particularly plagues women, which is heartbreaking because there's this idea that you have to be exactly the perfect fit for everything and know all the answers in order to qualify for the thing. And I know
Yeah.
I've had that, especially in talking with corporate clients before, but the best medicine and the best advice I've ever gotten is being transparent, being honest about what you're able to accomplish and where you think you can go with it. And also being in the place to kind of be authentic in sharing what you do know really well and like really, really say, hey, listen, I may not be able to do all of this, but this is my area and I know I can kill it for you in this way. Are you walking clients through that? And how are you helping them get over that idea of feeling like they have to be context, I never had a corporate job. I was freelance right out of college, started my company really young, have been doing it ever since. Like, made a joke at a networking event this week that I never had a formal job interview or resume or CV. So, my Achilles heel is sometimes in those corporate settings, I feel like there's this cloud of things that I don't know. Like, there's some way to be or to speak or to say. And I see it as a weakness and not a superpower of not having had that experience.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious if what your advice for someone who maybe they did come from corporate, but now they're going out on their own and there's this kind of misalignment happening. How do you help them get to the other side of that?
Oh, this is a fantastic question, Michelle. Because so often I think we underestimate our own brilliance, which is what leads us to undersell our brilliance, right? This is why I call swagger, right, your competitive advantage. Swagger we define as evidence based confidence, meaning it is your professional expertise, your lived experiences, the essence of who you are. That's what we're packaging up, and that's the story we're telling and selling in the corporate arena. I think back to my childhood. I remember growing up, we moved to a new neighborhood. The local kids teased us because we looked different. My family was an African family, and they're like, who are these, folks coming into our town? And I remember my mom marched right into the school. She said, they're not going to make fun of my kids. And so she brought our culture into local schools and universities and colleges, right? And used dance and music and storytelling to turn that into a business. My mom didn't have a corporate background, right? She was a lifelong civil servant, right? Up until the time that she passed away. And so she took what she was good at, the skills that she had, her story, and she turned that into contracts. And so I always return back to that because I remember after my layoff, right? Wondering like what is going to come, next for me on the horizon and not even remembering who I was. And I had to root back into my identity. I had to go back to my story and I had to use that as the impetus, the spark for what would open up new doors of opportunity. And so that is what I work with folks to return to, right? Who are you? How do you, align your unique identity, your authentic leadership style so that you can sell in a way that feels like you? So often we think there's only certain personalities that are celebrated or only certain people with, specific backgrounds that could be corporate consultants. But really, I love you saying, right, I don't come from a typical corporate background because sometimes that can be your competitive advantage, right? The fact
Right.
that you're mired by the way things have always been done. and that you're innovative and that you're willing to push the boundaries and find new solutions. So the very thing that you think could be what disqualifies you from being in certain rooms and tables is the very thing that gives you unique qualification to be able to position yourself as the go-to resource. So these are some of the things that we kind of work through, right? Like not just the resume on paper, but the stories, right? That hold
Sure.
the keys and the clues to the potential ways that you could benefit an organization.
I love that you shared that, and I also love to know that your mom and my mom would have been friends because that is my mom's MO completely. And so to your point, like the other competitive advantage I have is I'm a fourth generation female entrepreneur in my family. Like my mother owns her own business, my sister, my aunt, my grandmother, my great grandmother all owned businesses, and I forget how much of a wealth of knowledge that can be. And similar to your mom, my mom started her interior design firm with no experience, no accreditation, nothing, just a hobby that people wanted to pay her for, and then was able to grow that to what it is now. I'm sitting in her office right now recording this podcast. So there is that part of it too, right? So it's restructuring that to lead with that part of the story of saying that like this is how I'm able to have the ideas that I do is because I've been in environments that have fostered that kind of creative thinking since
Yeah.
in utero. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like that's
That-
kind of like an interesting part of it. And it is that subtle reframe in messaging that I think does kind of give you that extra little boost. I just gave a talk this week via a networking group that I was in, invited me back to speak to a women's leadership panel. And my topic was called Styled to Lead, the link between aesthetic and authority, and how we
yeah.
can use our aesthetic. So, our visual cues, the way that we present ourselves, how we carry ourselves, our colors, our social media, our website, or everything that's visual, and how that can help to catapult your own thought leadership and your authority in your space. And someone had brought up, she goes, the men in my office told me I'm not allowed to wear sneakers. And so today I'm wearing sneakers. And I said, I love that. But we talked about professionalism, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on this. We talked about professionalism in quotations and what it means to be, quote, professional, and how professionalism can also be a bit of a construct that serves a very misogynistic, patriarchal kind of structure that doesn't include a lot of different and innovative thinking, and stifles a lot of people. And that was the feedback from the women in the room is like, there's this expectation that I need to be this like bland, clean slate, palatable person in order to fit in this corporate world or fit in my career, and that's not who I am. And I kind of invited them. I was like, can you start to melt the two together, and how would you feel differently about your job? You strike me as a person that likes to live out loud. I love your colors already, and your site and your social media is such evidence of that. But I'm wondering if those conversations have come up for you at all in your work of like, especially that person that's transitioning. What does like quote professional mean when the workforce is so clearly changing?
Woo! What a powerful question. And I knew we
Me
were
too.
kindred spirits just hearing like your mom's legacy. So thank you for sharing that story. And just the love of color. So
Hmm.
when I think about this concept of professionalism, I really had to kind of unlearn some things because, I had built my career. I had, climbed up the ladder. I was advising Fortune 500 companies, everyone from local nonprofits to companies like Walmart, right? When you are in these different spaces, you start to see that there are different ways to be a corporate executive and ways to show up as professional. Like if you go to like a fintech startup, for example, they move and dress completely different than like a big bank, for example, right?
Totally.
And so you
Totally.
even get to choose the types of clients that fit your vibe. But I found that when I was kind of defining my sense of style as an entrepreneur, I had to let go of the all black that was in my closet when I was in corporate,
Yeah.
right? The string of pearls, right? I was clutching, right? As I was kind of figuring out what the next moves are. And I remember talking to my designer at the time and saying, "Whatever you do with our brand colors, just don't give me navy." I was like, this is not corporate. It's not gonna be for corporate. Whatever you do, give me the wildest, boldest colors you could possibly come up with because this is not for corporate. It was meant to be for individual consumers." And I remember her saying, like, "I would love to, have you take some photos in a t-shirt maybe." And I was like horrified. I was like, "A t-shirt?
A
How does that
t-shirt.
thing, professional?" But I really had to start showcasing the human side of me, right? Not just the intellect, not just the, receipts, the resume, but also the personality, right? The fact that I love fashion. It's okay to be smart and fashionable. It's okay to be bold and introverted, right? Like there are these things that we feel like are different buckets and silos, but it's okay to be all of you in the boardroom. And I find that those are the conversation starters, right? When I walk in and I'm wearing like a statement piece, that is what, inspires other people to come up and connect and talk. So I think the more you are, the more authentic you are, the easier it is to attract your folks who match your vibe. So those are some of the things, the journey that I went on to kind of give myself permission to like not think it was just stuffy stale scripts, but really to lean into like who do I want to be in this moment? And as my style is evolving, showcasing more of that and being comfortable with sharing the fullest expression of myself. It was a major shift.
And that branding is intended to both attract who's the right fit for you, but also repel people that are the wrong fit. Like, I very
Exactly.
much believe in that, and that you're not everyone is meant to access you. And I think this is the trap that freelancers fall into. And Taylor Swift this week even said, think of your energy as a luxury commodity. Like, your own energy is luxury. Not everyone can afford you, period, And to kind of shift that to be like, I would much rather dress loud and bold and colorful and myself, so that the person who's not into that is like, oh no, like that they self select out, right? Because if I'm showing up as something that's not myself, that is buttoned up, that is all black, like my sister dresses in all black. She's a wedding planner, but she's always in black. She's very prim and proper. She's like to a T, crisp, sharp. And the two of us traveling together is the funniest thing because we are yin and yang. I could not be farther from that. She's Scorpio energy, dark hair, dark eyes. And I'm like blonde, California, bright, colorful, fun. Like, I just want to have a good time. So it's so interesting that you can signal so much of that by the way that you present yourself aesthetically. And what made me sad about the conversation that I had at this leadership summit was how many people felt like they were not representing themselves, or that they didn't feel in alignment with what they were doing. And I was like, guys, work is so much of our life. Like, unfortunately, fortunately and unfortunately. Like, I feel very fortunate, but it consumes how we exist in this world. You all know how much I love a brag-worthy brand, and when it comes to creating stickers and labels that elevate your branding, Sticker Giant is the brand that you can trust. Whether you're looking to create something for fun for your next launch, elevate your brand, or add a little extra flair to your packaging, Sticker Giant's custom stickers and labels help your brand get noticed in all the right ways. They've got a dedicated team handling every detail, so you can count on Sticker Giant to bring your designs to life just the way that you imagined. And Sticker Giant stickers and labels are proudly made in the US of A. If you're ready to give your brand that extra boost, go to stickergiant.com and use promo code KMA25 for 25% off your first order. Sticker Giant, your partner in the sticker and label business. And so I think it sparked a really great conversation about how do we change that? And like you said, to your point, like with the workforce changing, there was a time when before COVID, they said by 2030, only 30% of the American workforce would be working online. And then we had COVID, and obviously that sped up. But even more so, like in online spaces and how we show up. What are your favorite ways to bring yourself back to center when you're feeling like, oh, I'm not really showing up as myself, or this opportunity didn't feel aligned, or this didn't really work out for me, or this person isn't a fit for me? As yourself as a business owner, how do you pull back to center?
Yeah. So one of the things that I love to use as an entrepreneur is this concept of design thinking. Design thinking,
Ooh,
meaning no right or wrong way to do a thing, but you learn by building in public, right? By designing in partnership with your customers, with your clients, and being brave enough, right, to be seen, figuring it out. And I think so often we think there's a right way and a wrong way to sell, right? There's like we have our ideas in our mind of what a typical salesperson looks like. But the reality is, like, I have a background in strategic marketing for like big, medical device companies. Those salespeople are not, typical salespeople. They're engineers, deep product experts, right? Marketers who really understand the story of the impact that product can create. So why are we not, right, owning our identities as salespeople, right? As being able to be the best representative of our brand because we built it. And so when we give away that power and when we start kind of just looking at and mimicking what we see, that's where we start to lose steam. But when we start really owning it and creating our own path and our own way of marketing and selling in the corporate arena, that's when it starts to feel like home. And so that's really what when I'm thinking about moments that I've had to return back to center, I've had to like tune out a lot of the noise. Maybe it
Yeah.
means following, unscrolling, right? Not looking at the doomsday and really thinking about like, how do I want to feel? How do I want my success to feel? And then what needs to happen to support that vision? So those are the things that I do, just kind of really being open to playful creation and like using design thinking, but then also tuning out the noise that doesn't resonate with what I feel like results in comparisonitis and really knowing that my path, right? I always say like the lead generation strategies that work for you are the lead generation strategies that you will work, the things that you know you'll be able to return to again and again and again. So those are some of the things that I do.
And audit and curate and audit and curate and audit and curate. And that was advice that I gave. Same thing to this group was like, she goes, I get overwhelmed by all the ideas that I could have for places that I could go. And I said, it's your job to set that appointment with yourself, set it out a quarter in advance or twice a year or once a month and say, okay, I'm going to sit down on this day and I'm going to look at what am I enjoying doing and what am I hating doing? What am I enjoying? Where am I enjoying showing up and where am I showing up and not getting a return and this is just a dead end thing? Because I think it's really easy, like you said, to get sucked in. That's where the imposter syndrome comes from. It's from looking at what everybody else is doing. And guess what? If you see what your competitors are doing, you're inadvertently absorbing them. You're pulling in their energy to you. And then you're not also being yourself. So it is that fine line, that tricky thing. Um, Speaking of being influenced by other people, who do you look to that you love? Like, who's on your radar as like, "Oh, I really love what this person is all about," or are you truly like, "It's me and my brain, and I'm journaling, and I'm just thinking I'm working with myself." Do you have those sources or people that stick out?
Yeah, so when we first created our brand, it's so interesting because we do a lot of like burnout prevention. And
Sure,
we'll say, look at your comps, who's on the market. And it's like most traditional wellness brands are telling people to be very zen,
sure.
to go out and calm down. And we wanted to intentionally create a brand that really would make people come back to life, right? Like with the bold colors that like really allow you to be the fullest expression of yourself. And so when we were looking for like comps on the market, we were really taking inspiration from entertainment and media and that and like non-traditional models, right, of what it looks like. So the one that I always think of is like Bose, like who had been at the head of Uber and chief marketing officer. I just love that she embodies her authentic style, both from fashion, business, in being vulnerable and telling her story, right? I'm looking at models that kind of defy traditional lanes and folks who are creating their own lane. So that's really, I think, I mean, there's so many other examples that I can think of, but those are kind of the models where I'm like, okay, there's a new way to be either a corporate executive or your own boss in an entrepreneurial realm. Like, we don't have to be either or. You could have a full time job and a side hustle as a
Yes.
freelancer. You could
Yeah.
be a consultant and advise corporate clients. You don't have to put yourself in these compartmentalized
Yeah.
boxes or cubicles. Like that's the old way of thinking. And then the other part I will say is a lot of what we're is on the horizon has never been done before. Like I'm sure you are hearing a lot about AI and how it's disrupting things for creatives and alike. And I just think the problems we're about to face, we've never faced before. So I think don't be afraid to create your own path, to create your own frameworks and methods and approaches because the new solutions that are gonna win in this market are up for anyone. It's anybody's game, right? Like, in terms of the new era that we're moving into. So I think there's just a lot of opportunity for folks who are lane shifters, creating their own lane, and just bold enough to think outside the box.
I think you're right on the money, first of all. And I think that's what's exciting to me about AI is that it won't be a substitute for taste. And this is what I have to keep reminding the designers that listen and the entrepreneurs and the people that are arguably like really scared about what this new technology means for them, especially if they've been kind of what I call like a pixel pusher. Like if you've been the person that's been designing the business cards and the letterhead and the da da da, like, and that's your job, and you've if you've positioned yourself as a technician, I think you absolutely have reasonable worry. If you can position yourself as a visionary and say, I know what's good and I know what's going to work for your business because I've done this many times. And yes, I might use this tool to help me execute it. I think that's where the secret sauce is. But that comes about from strengthening that muscle of curating what you see and what you find value in and where
Yeah.
you see value. And that comes about from the collective of your lived experience. That's the thing is like, we can't take it for granted. Like, I'm
Yeah.
such a foodie. I have to remember that going to a delicious restaurant with a new chef is an extension of my creative skill set. Consuming someone else's art is a way to like ingest and embed someone else's creativity. And that all of that ends up connected. And that's where I do think we win out over AI, right? So I end up being an optimist. Are you a technology optimist or pessimist?
I'm an optimist because I spent the bulk of my career deploying emerging tech, like in healthcare and other
Yeah.
industries. So I, but when I built my business, I was like, this is a people business, not a tech business. So we're not building an app platform, but we're always working at the intersection of business and technology. Yeah, I even think about the identity of as a creative, like my little sister's a filmmaker and has a marketing background. And so she identifies as a creative person. And I only through entrepreneurship started to be like, hey, I am creative, like
Yeah.
as a consultant, like you're always creating from a blank canvas, right? Paths, strategic roadmaps that didn't exist before, products and new ways of solving like big problems. So there was always that tendency, but I never really identified with it until I built my own brand. And I
Yeah.
remember when I got the first photos back, from the photography shoot that we did just before our launch, and it was so beautiful just to see the idea come from inside my mind onto the page, right? And so I think that's real, opportunity here, that mindset shift, the paradigm shift that says, "I'm no more just a taskmaster," right? I'm a
Yes.
trusted advisor, right? I'm a visionary leader who can help other people solve bigger problems, especially as we're thinking about repositioning your talents and gifts in the age of AI. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for freelancers, for consultants, for marketing strategists who are thinking bigger and more broadly than the traditional service provider lanes, and in terms of just saying like, I can, pick my own adventure, pick my own path. And
Yes.
one of the things that I love the most about you is I remember watching one of your previous episodes for the podcast and you saying this goal of having clients in every continent. What was the goal that you had set for yourself?
Yes, yes. So we every year at the beginning of the year, our team does what we call bingos. So we like write out our bingo card with all different goals, and then whoever gets to bingo first gets a spa gift card because that's
Yeah.
definitely what everybody wants.
Yeah.
But one of the crazy ones to kind of shoot super high is like, okay, what would it look like to have a client on every continent? Or a client from every country, even, right? Like, how can we start to spread and play in a global world? And it might have been the conversation that we had with Shay Bakani from Centra Financial, where we really talked about this, and we talked about how I personally believe in a global economy because I also traveled as a digital nomad for 3 years and like was working from countries all around the world, and my team is very international. My podcast manager is in Spain, my business manager is in Canada. We've worked with people from all over because I want the cream of the crop. I want the person that's best fit for the job, and I'm not so concerned with it being in a US zip code. Like that's if this person is qualified and wonderful and lovely to work with, I'm so happy to support them. And so I think that's also this digital revolution and work remote possibility has opened up those doors. But I love a big lofty goal. We're not there yet, so it might have to roll over into next year's goals also. But we'll start chipping away at it, you know?
The sky is the limit. I think one of the hidden benefits of, going through a global pandemic was just recognizing that my clients don't just have to be in my backyard, right? Like the fact
Yes.
that we literally could not physically leave our homes and had to figure out a way to reach people. I mean, that's the power of great marketing, right? And telling a brand story. We reached 5 continents in 5 years, right? And our clients who we've served, they've been, on the stage in, like, Tulum and Paris and
Amazing.
Barcelona sharing their gifts, right? And so I think this is a moment where there are no limits, there are no boundaries. The world is our playground, right? And it's about dreaming as big as we want in terms of being able to make that global impact.
And that has to come from an abundance place. That has to come from there's plenty of work for me and there's plenty of work for everyone else. It's not I'm getting the job, therefore someone else can't. It's very much operating from a place of I have so much to learn from other people. I'm so humbled by getting to talk to our clients, and I'm always looking for those kind of roundabout opportunities that kind of end up falling in your lap where it is a slam dunk. The biggest compliment for me when someone is on our discovery call is like, I want to work with you and no one else. And I was like, yes, this just made my sales cycle so easy. So I'll tell you, and
Exactly.
I'll leave you with this funny story. 2 years ago, when I turned 30, I told my friends, I have no idea when I'm getting married. I'm single, so I have no idea when I'm getting married. I know I'm turning 30, so we're going to go to Italy for my birthday. And so I booked a villa for us to stay at in Italy for the week. And I said, you guys cover your own airfare, but once you're there, like I've got the place covered. And I booked a place from Airbnb with my sister. We're looking at it, and it has no reviews, but it has a super host. And I'm like, do we risk it? Like, there's no reviews. The photos look fine. She's like, yeah, just go for it. So we book it. We're there. We're having a fabulous time. I'm on WhatsApp with the super host. Turns out she is the Airbnb ambassador of Italy and runs 20 different properties throughout Capri, Ischia, Amalfi Coast, Naples, all these places. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is amazing. I'd love to chat with you. Like, that sounds like an incredible business." And she used to be a lawyer, and she's just about my age. And we started chatting, and she goes, "Also, I think I will hire you for branding." And I was like, great, fabulous. So it was just I was a genuine customer. I was just someone who was interested and curious, and it was so aligned. And it's one of my favorite projects to date. It's a good podcast episode. We'll make sure to link it in the show notes. Her name's Luigia, and it was such a fun way. Like, talk about dream project. Like, hello, like Italian Airbnb management company, like dream. So it's just funny how those things happen, and I think that's just kind of the permission slip to kind of, again, like, live out loud, do the thing that you want to do, and not discount the fact that it could lead to an opportunity.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that story so much because it dispels a lot of the myths about what we think a corporate client even is.
Yes. Yes.
Like, we have this idea of stuffy suits in, a boardroom, and it's like, it could be, right, and on the coast of Italy. It could be, in a relaxed, casual setting. It could be you living your best life and stumbling upon a conversation that leads into a contract. And so I even think the way that we define sales systems, right? Like,
Yeah.
how can you show up in spaces where you know your dream clients are going to be hanging out, right? How can you connect the dots between your personal story and what matters most to them, right? Demystifying and dispelling some of those myths, I think, can be so powerful because then we start to feel like anything is possible.
And you gotta see it to believe it. There's a great video on your website, and if people haven't seen it, they should go click through it. But someone had mentioned in one of the testimonial segments that they got an immense amount of value out of being in circles where people ask the question they didn't think to ask. And this, to me, is social learning. And this is one of the beautiful things about social media, but one of the worst things about being isolated and being work from home is being in spaces where people are asking those type of questions. And to your point, going where your ideal client is. I love to work from the fanciest hotel in my town because just eavesdropping on people is so valuable because you're like, wow, I don't know where I would move my private jet if I had one. If it was a Thursday and it was raining. It's just so funny to just be to play make believe and be in those spots because when you see it, you can believe it. Do you like to do that
Yeah.
as well?
I do, and I think it's daydreaming is what I call
Oh,
it,
for
right?
sure,
Like,
for sure.
dreaming out loud in front of the right folks, and I think sometimes when you're going against the grain, like, let's say you are, running your own consultancy and everyone you know has a 9 to 5, right? They're just thinking differently. So being in spaces where you can hear the questions people didn't think to ask, or even if you're in entrepreneurial communities, but they really focus more on individual consumers. This is something that comes up a lot, right? Corporate clients aren't going to watch all of your Instagram reels, pay you with a PayPal, account and you sign up without talking to anybody. Their process of how they buy is completely different. And so when I'm leading our mastermind experiences with independent consultants seeking more corporate clients, I'm really putting myself back in the seat I was when I was a former
Yeah.
corporate buyer. So I used to be on the other side of the table, being the one hiring the vendors, the consultants, the contractors, right, on behalf of the largest global brands. And so when I found myself in the online world and I was like, why can't I sell a $29 product on the internet? Like, what am I missing here? I was like, I think I'm fairly smart. Like, what's not connecting? It's like I was selling in a way that I would not have bought as a
Yep.
former corporate buyer. And
Yep.
so when I pivoted into returning back to my corporate consulting roots and selling to organizations, I started really selling instead of not the way I thought sales was supposed to be, but in the way I knew that corporate buyers purchase services. And so that's, I think, can be really a powerful shift in terms of like saying, am I in an environment that actually matches my business model? Do these strategies align with the way I want to show up? And then does this outreach, plan resonate with how my target audience actually shops? All answering those questions can really lead you to spaces that feel more resonant with, your actual goals.
And continue to grow and perfect yourself at the top tier of your ability. I just had this conversation. It's like you jumped into my brain. I just had this conversation with a client who runs a luxury travel service company, and they host trips for women between $10,000 to $20,000 per trip. And I was talking with her mom, and her mom's like, we should really sell our guides to these locations, for like, $25 a download. I said, no offense, but the person who's buying your guide for $25 is not converting to a $10,000 trip. If you're telling them all the trade secrets for 25 bucks, they're not then going to turn over and be like, just kidding, I want you to plan it for 10. But what can you do for the person that's booking the trip for 10 that makes their life better? What can you provide for them? How can you create more value for them? How can you create more luxury for them, knowing that that retention of that person that comes on multiple trips with you for $10,000 a pop, the retention of that person is going to be your best marketing you've ever had, because
Yeah.
that retention is so much more cost effective than recruitment. Like trying to recruit somebody to go from $25 to 10, it's a losing battle versus keep the people at 10. I mean, just cater to them and cater to what they need and provide a really quality service, because the person that's spending $10,000 on a trip knows somebody that would spend 30 on a trip. Like that's the thing, is like I think people get really distracted by the smaller fish, the low-hanging fruit, the things that feel like the quick cash grab when that's not the customer at all. So it kind of I think I like could see the like smoke coming out of her ears and she was like, "Oh." And I was like, "Don't worry, I have a plan. I have a plan." So I think you're nodding along. Does this sound like something you might say?
Now you're jumping in my brain because
Yeah.
so many of us think, oh, if we make the price lower, it'll be easier to say yes. And it's like, think you just gave the example, right, of lower ticket models. But it's like, even just thinking about how many clients do I actually need to hit my revenue target, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I give the example of like course creators, right? Everyone at some point thought, okay, I'll create an online course. It'll be so easy to find clients and how I'll be able to hit my revenue. Let's just take an average online course. $1,000 for an online course. How many clients do you need to hit 50K? 50 individual clients. That's 50 sales calls, 50 clients to manage and track, and you hit 50K. But if you translate that into the corporate arena, that could be a 50K corporate training contract. That same online course that you created, that you're selling at $1,000 per individual consumer, now all of a sudden you could get 50K with a corporate training contract.
And now, because the information is harder to come by because it is only at the $50,000 level, it's now more valuable. Also,
Yes, yes.
yes.
It's like, what does it look like to hit your revenue with a handful of clients? And start asking that question, right? Because that's different than, I've got to hustle, right? And figure out how to add up a lot of these small deals like onesie, twosie engagements. But what does it really look like to build a body of work that then can earn you revenue, whether or not you're physically present, right? Thinking about your intellectual capital, your ideas, monetizing those at the highest level. This is the season to dream bigger.
Ugh. At the time we're recording, we're just creeping up on that September 1, which I always feel like feels like a January 1, right? People come back from summer. They're like, oh shit, I got to start getting serious about my business again. If you could give advice to the person that really is like, okay, September 1 is go time. What's something that you could just like shake them and tell them if they are feeling stuck, but they're resonating with everything that we said so far?
Yeah. September is the busiest B2B buying season of the year. So for B2B buyers, for clients, they're shopping because they've either got revenue, actually budget that needs to be spent before the end of the year, they use it or lose it, or they're planning for a budget for the coming year, so for 2026. So this is kind of that sweet spot, that moment in time where you're able to really build relationships that are going to multiply and amplify your impact. So if you are somebody who feels like you got to have it all perfect and you got to, wait until you have the plan and everything lined up and then you're going to reach out in January, I say start now. Start by putting yourself in the shoes of the organization. The more you're focusing on yourself and your offers and showing up perfectly, the less you're actually resonating with what actually matters most to them. So I say start with them, clearly identify what problems they've got going on, really build those deep relationships because that is what is going to be able to translate those conversations into contracts. So a lot of times, people want to kind of have this perfectly mapped out plan. I say really start with the conversations, be curious, right? Stop focusing on having perfect, stale and stuffy scripts and really think about the questions you're asking to be able to understand in their words, how they value your expertise and your services and the impact you can make within their organization.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. If people want more of you, which I have a feeling they're going to after this episode, can you tell us where we can find you, follow you, work with you, all of that good stuff?
Yeah. So if people are interested in learning more, maybe you've previously had an organization fall into your lap and you know you want more, but you haven't really historically had to go out and find new business in the corporate arena, I invite you to download our ultimate guide to sealing more corporate deals. This is a binge-worthy, jam-packed, series of episodes that'll walk you through exactly what you need to know to position your business for bigger contracts. You can access our free ultimate guide to sealing more corporate deals by visiting us at sealthecorporatedeal.com.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Anniedi. It was so lovely chatting with you. I'm sure this won't be the last time that we end up having you on the podcast. Something tells me you're going to be a repeat guest. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Don't forget to send to a friend, save, share, follow, subscribe on YouTube as well, because we're on YouTube, guys, and anywhere you listen to podcasts. This was Kiss My Aesthetic. Thanks so much. Bye.
Thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.